You're watching Man Coverage with Nate Schmidt and James Bonneville on National Streaming Sports.
Good morning, everybody. This is Man Coverage. This is Knoxville Nate, James Bonneville. It is college football 2024. We are coming to you live on Sunday, August 25th, 2024. James, how are you, sir?
It's football season, baby. It's football season. I'm freaking doing fantastic.
Wonderful. It's great to hear. We are coming to you live today, brought to you by BetUs.com, the premium betting service in all of the land. Go to BetUs.com right now, place your bets, and maybe listen to the show. Maybe you'll learn a thing or two about sports betting and who to put your money on today. But obviously, we kicked off the season yesterday. We had a fairly decent matchup with the Florida State Seminoles of the United States versus Georgia Tech, Ramblin' Wreck of the United States in Dublin, Ireland. Game did not really go as planned. What was Florida State favored by, James? Do you remember the BetUs.com line on this game?
I do not know the BetUsline.com off the top of my head, but I would venture a guess off the top of my head that Florida State was probably predicted to win by a few, to say the least. I mean,
the last we saw them, they were wanting to be in the college football playoff. Their quarterback gets hurt. They get left out. They play Georgia in the bowl game and get beat by 60. So you'd think that this team might be a little fired up, might have some interest in, winning their season opener against Georgia Tech, and yet it doesn't happen. Kind of a weird football game. I mean, I'm not really sure what Florida State thought they were going to get out of playing this game in Dublin, Ireland, but it didn't go as planned. James, what did you think about Georgia Tech? Is Georgia Tech better, or Florida State just still not good? What is your thoughts on this game?
Well, I never like to grade a team after their first game of the season, but there were some things I saw from the game that really stuck out to me. Honestly, I mean, Florida State lost 15 starters from last year's team, and you look at their offensive line depth. There's a lot of juniors and seniors on this team. I mean, their line of scrimmage play was really their calling card coming into this year. And honestly, I look at this game, and a lot of people are dumping on DJU. I don't think DJU's the problem. I mean, it's not like we don't know who DJU is. You already know what's out there. He likes to throw to the sidelines, and he'll throw deep periodically, but he won't throw over the middle. Well, guess what happened yesterday? The exact same thing, over and over and over again. A lot of short passes to the sidelines, a couple deep options, but it's not like they've got a receiving core that can go deep, and that offensive line did nothing for him. I mean, absolutely nothing for him. I mean, look, the stats in this game are just like ridiculous. Let me bring them up here. 95, 93 yards rushing, 98 yards rushing on 31 attempts, for 3.2 per carry. I mean,
Yeah.
you're not gonna win games doing that when you're like the mainstay of your team with Roydell Williams and Tofil is your running game. When you don't have the receiving core, and they went 98 yards. Now, Brent Key, I've said for some time, is an underrated coach. But they came to play. They put a hat on a hat, like Canes King kept saying throughout the game, and they played.
Yeah, Haynes King's not horrible either. I liked that pickup. You know, I believe he played at Texas A&M.
Yeah.
Before this, Texas A&M, you know, wasn't. Yeah, he wasn't great there, but I saw some flashes, and then you know, I do think Georgia Tech has improved. I mean, this team rallied around this coach, wanted him to get the job. He got the job, and things have looked up. They a couple weeks ago they signed their first ever 5-star in the history of the program, and you know, they're recruiting at a pretty good clip, and I think it's going to get better after this victory. And just so you know, the betus.com line for this game was 12.5 Florida State going in to the ball game. Florida State was ranked number 10. They were favored by 12.5, and they went down. But you know, you want to critique DJU's play. You want to rip on him. Go watch the end of the game where he completed 2 4th and 8s on, you know, successive drives, and kept them in the ball game and tied it up 21-all. I mean, at some point, the defense has got to get a stop. At some point, somebody's got to get a play. As you mentioned, the receivers were pretty pedestrian. I mean, the leading receiver was Ja'Kai Douglas with 4 catches for 55 yards. Malik Benson had 4 catches for 39 yards. I mean, where's the breakout player? I mean, the longest play in the game was a 21-yarder to the running back. So, you know, I just this team kind of, I just think they kind of are what they are. And I'm not sure they were really the 10th ranked team in the country. I'm not sure that's where I had them. And they certainly didn't look like the 10th ranked team in the country either. Where does Florida State go from here, James? Because their schedule this year, you know, not that tough. I mean, honestly, they've got Clemson, they've got Miami, they've got Notre Dame. And other than that, they've got a lot of winnable games. Do you think they can regroup and get back on track?
Yeah, I think they've got some things they got to clean up, though. Like, they allowed Haynes King to get the edge on them so many times on so many running plays. They've got to do a better job of containing that edge and just doing better in the line of scrimmage. I mean, their offensive line did nothing for them, and they've got a decent running game. I mean, everybody keeps talking about, well, they should have thrown deep more. DJU can't throw to himself. I mean, Ja'Kai Douglas is probably their best threat, and I wouldn't call him a burner by any stretch of the imagination. I mean, they lost Johnny Wilson and Keon Coleman. That's a big loss.
It's a big loss, and they, you know, may not necessarily replace those guys just yet.
Yeah.
And like I said, there just was no deep threat. There was no, you know, big time plays going down, and it just looked like a team that was lacking some explosive playmakers to begin the season. Was my opinion.
They had one good drive at the beginning of the game, and after that, really Georgia Tech kind of controlled the game.
Yeah, kind of scary thought. But, you know, this is why I didn't really recommend going to Dublin, Ireland to play your first game of the year at 9 a.m. in the morning, you know, on national television a week before college football starts. I mean, what did Florida State really have to gain by playing this game, James?
TV coverage, but if you lose, that's a double-edged sword.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, right now, as some people pointed out, you know, there's some conflict going on with Florida State and the ACC conference. They're actually suing the conference right now to get out of it. So, you know, they need to win games this year, and they need to look good if they want to, you know, have the gusto to get out of their contract. I really don't think they're going to be able to, but they're certainly trying, and they're certainly suing the ACC conference. They need to have a little bit of a better, better showing, I think, if they're going to, get a bunch of people wanting them to come to either the Big Ten or the SEC. Just thinking, where if they, let's say they win this lawsuit, let's say they get out of the ACC, where would you see Florida State even going?
God, that's a $6 million question. Knowing that university, they're not going to want to go to the SEC because they really see themselves as a kind of like Miami did under Dr. Foote, as this academic institution. I think they're going to try to get into the Big Ten, but I could see the Big 12 too as well. I think from a financial standpoint, if they get in the Big Ten, then I think the Big Ten's got to go Notre Dame and then shut stuff down, because there's no way you can get beyond 20. I mean, what are we going to have, 30-team conferences at some point? I mean, that would be ridiculous.
It looks kind of where we're going here, but I think it would behoove the Big Ten to add Notre Dame and Florida State. I think that would solidify them as the premier conference, and do a lot of good for them. But it's just a weird, it's a weird setup. There's no more geographical conferences anymore. It's just kind of all over the board, and that's where college football is at. Speaking of college football, we've got some more games coming up next week, where the week 1 kickoff gets going. I've got a few that I've got my eye on. I want to know which games kind of stand out to you. Which games do you think are, the best games, are going to be the best games of the season? Anything else from yesterday? Hawaii played Delaware State. SMU played Nevada. Nothing really blew me away.
The SMU Nevada game was kind of shocking. Like, in my opinion, SMU got lucky. They should have lost that game. And Nevada is just, they just don't have the money to play in the space. They got Savoin Red, the old running back from Texas, who's not even starting at Nevada. Yeah. He's playing there. And they were hanging around to the bitter end. And honestly, SMU just didn't look good. And this is it's a bad day to start the ACC when two of your teams that were potentially in your top half of your conference go down, or did not look good, to say the least. Granted, it's a 1-game sample size, but the other game I want to talk about is New Mexico versus Montana State. Holy moly, that fourth quarter, Montana State really poured it on at the end to come back and win that game. Now, Bronco Mendenhall year 1 has always been kind of rough. I can tell you next year you're going to see a different Lobos team, but I'm intrigued by this Mountain West. I think it's going to be a lot deeper than people think it's going to be, but this is going to be an interesting year in the Mountain West as a whole.
Yeah, kind of a weird slate of games in week 0 here, but we've got some pretty good-looking contests coming up next week for sure. And there's a couple of them that really stand out to me that I'm looking at. And obviously, I think the Notre Dame, Texas A&M game, obviously Clemson, Georgia, I think is the biggest game that we're looking at. Clemson and Georgia is going to tell us a lot about both of those teams. I actually expect Georgia to kick that ass, but who knows? It could be interesting game to watch, but I really think Clemson and Notre Dame is probably the marquee matchup for next week. But as I mentioned, Notre Dame, Texas A&M, Fresno State, Michigan, USC, LSU, Miami, Florida, and then Penn State, West Virginia. Let's talk about the Clemson-Georgia game first, James. What do you expect? What are you looking to see in the week 1 matchup with Georgia and Clemson?
Honestly, I want to see what Clemson does coming out of the gates. They have had issues with their passing game as of late, but they've looked better. Georgia is who Georgia is. I think with ETN at running back is going to make things a lot easier, but their passing game, I mean, you lost McConkey, you lost Bowers. How do you replace that? I mean, Carson Beck, I got to give him credit. He's one of those guys that just doesn't make mistakes. Is he gonna be a guy you could, lean on if you're down 14 in the fourth quarter to try to get that comeback? Probably not. But I mean, if Clemson's going to win this game, they got to throw the ball. We know they can run with Maffa and their quarterback with Klubnik, but they got to do something there. They got to show like the days of old when Trevor Lawrence and Watson were quarterback, where that defensive line was just standout. They had fast linebackers. They were everywhere. They've kind of lost that mojo, and can they get it back?
Yeah, and we were just talking about Florida State and playmakers. My question is, does Clemson have a playmaker like they've had in the past? We were talking about how the last few years we have not seen, Mari Rodgers. We haven't seen T. Higgins. We haven't seen some of those breakout players. As Justin just commented online, looking for Clemson to get back to being a contender. They were in the college football playoff, Justin, for 6 years in a row. I mean, that's doing something down there. And Dabo had this thing rolling, and we were pumping Justin Ross. You name it. They were throwing guys into the league left and right. Why am I forgetting the name of the little slot receiver who plays for Oakland Raiders?
Amari.
No.
Hunter
13.
Renfrow.
Hunter Renfrow, Mari Rodgers, T. Higgins. I mean, Justin Ross, the Deion Kane. The list goes on and on. They were just pumping guys into the league.
Sammy Watkins.
Sammy. I mean, even before that, Martavis Bryant, Sammy Watkins, Mike Williams. The list went on. And the last few years, it's kind of like, who's making plays for this team? Nobody. And I think it's time where they need a breakout player. They've been able to run the football, but they need to be able to push the ball downfield. Can Klubnik throw it? Do they have the receivers to catch it? That's what I'm looking for. From Clemson in this first game. From Georgia, I'm looking for much of the same. I think their defense will be good. They will run the football. Carson Beck impressed me last year. I think he did very well in his first year as a starter. And their only issue is wide receiver as well. I mean, Ra Thomas is kicked off the team for his second arrest in year and a half, and facing we're not even going to get into the charges because they're disgusting. But he's gone and he ain't coming back. So they're going to need some kids to step up. The good news about Georgia is, James, they've got depth galore, and they've got 5 stars, behind 5 stars, and they've got 4 stars behind 5 stars. And I think that they're going to be okay. Don't you?
Well, I mean, you bring 4 of your 5 guys back on your offensive line. I mean, that's a great starting point. I mean, they with ETN and their running game, I mean, they're going to have to force teams to put 8 guys in the box and really push things, even though their passing game isn't there. I mean, you look at their roster. I mean, there was a time period where they had tight ends growing out of their ears. Yeah. Now Urasek is their tight end. And, I mean, they're probably the biggest playmaker right now is Dominic Leavitt. I mean, he's okay. Yeah. I wouldn't call him a game breaker unless he's really had a good offseason. I mean, right now, I got to take Georgia and, give me, the point with the points. I mean, just because you look at that defense time over time, Kirby's done a hell of a job.
No doubt. And I love the addition of Trevor Etienne. I thought that was one of the biggest add-ons in this offseason because the rich get richer. It just really helps this backfield and really makes this backfield go. But as Justin says, there's no more Brock Bowers and there's no more Darnell Washington. I mean, you think they had a 2-headed monster at tight end, 2 guys that are probably going to start, in the NFL. Darnell Washington is now at Pittsburgh, and Brock Bowers is out in Oakland, penciled in as a starter. So, those 2 guys were prolific. Darnell Washington was a little bit more of a blocker. Brock Bowers was more of the breakaway, get me down the field tight end who could make big plays and was a coverage nightmare. And they don't have that guy, as Justin just said. And as you said, James, they don't have that guy at tight end. And, we're still looking to see which of these wide receivers can bust out. Dominic Levet, as you mentioned, Arian Smith is slated as a starter, Dylan Bell. And then they've got some transfer guys that are going to be in the fold trying to help them out. But, we're going to be looking at that game very, very closely. Probably number 2 on my list is going to be the Notre Dame and Texas A&M game. And the reason I say that is what does Notre Dame look like this year? And what does this new Texas A&M club look like in year 1? What do you think about this game, James? And what are you looking for in this Texas A&M Notre Dame game?
Honestly, line of scrimmage play. Notre Dame, they lost Alt to the pros, who was an unbelievable left tackle. He was not that ballyhooed coming out of high school. He came out of De La Salle, or was it Tino Grace in the Twin Cities? Dad was 10-year NFL player. Brother played in the NHL. This kid is just really big, really good on his feet, has a great punch. But Notre Dame consistently has that strong offensive line. They lost Estime at running back to the pros, but they always have that running game. Once again, it's their outside, their receiving core, their D-backs have never been the strongest. But you get them in the box, they throw a punch. A&M is probably the most Jekyll and Hyde team you probably could find over the last, 20 years? Even more so than Miami. On paper, they should be good, but we don't play games on paper. I think they looked a little bit better down the stretch last year. But now, with Elko coming in, it'd be interesting how quickly he can put his stamp on this team. Right now, I got to go with the Irish, though, wouldn't you?
Yeah, I don't know what Texas A&M is going to look like. And, with the first year under Elko, it's, there's a lot of pressure on them when you fire a coach and hand him $80 million to walk away.
Yeah.
Obviously you're expecting big things from the new coach. And I agree with you on the wide receivers of Notre Dame. However, I like their defensive backfield last year, Cam Hart and, they had Kyle Hamilton 2 years ago. They've had some DBs that have made plays. It's just, and then the defense hasn't been bad. It's just the offense getting it going. Riley Leonard, is he going to be better than Sam Hartman? I don't know. Sam Hartman wasn't terrible, but they've had trouble developing a quarterback. They seem to want to go out and pluck one each year. I'm not sure that's the way to go. I'm not sure if Riley Leonard is an upgrade over Hartman, is he?
Well, he's just a different type of quarterback. Leonard can both run and pass versus Hartman, which was, he was very precise in his throwing motions, and he was a good leader on the field. It's not like Riley Leonard's not, because Riley Leonard is a great talent. It was just when Notre Dame brought him in, I'm like, God, does he really fit what they're trying to do in South Bend under this Freeman offense? So,
yeah. No doubt. I'm with you on that one. Any of these other games stick out before we go do our top 12 breakdown? We mentioned the Florida-Miami game. We mentioned a couple of these other matchups. Any of them stick out to you? Penn State, West Virginia. Which ones is catching you?
Honestly,
most?
Sunday night, USC LSU.
Yeah.
That's 2 teams with dogs with different fleas. You look at USC. I think it's really high putting them at 23 going into the year. Their running back situation, their receiver, their specialty guys are really amazing. But unless you've been living under a rock since Lincoln Riley showed up in LA, he's taken the same problems from Lincoln and brought them with him to LA, and they just don't have the line of scrimmage play. And now you're going to play LSU, a Brian Kelly team who, there were times they looked really good last year, and there are times they really didn't. Honestly, but you look at Brian Kelly's teams over and over again, their line of scrimmage play has always been a hallmark of his programs. Who imposes whose will? Because you're going to see Garrett Nussmeier, who we've been talking about on the show for ages, is finally getting the ball to be the starting quarterback at LSU, which I am so happy for him that he stayed and dug it out to see what he can do in Baton Rouge.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, last year Jaden Daniels was cooking, and that offense was legit, no doubt. But the defense couldn't stop anybody at times, and that was kind of mind blowing how bad their defense was at times. I mean, they could score with anybody, but if you can't stop anybody, it's hard to be a top team in this league. But we're going to go ahead and break down the top 12 teams in college football. But we're going to bring in our special guest host for the day, friend of the program, your own, the quarterback, Mr. Steve Bellisari. Steve, how are you doing, brother?
Doing good, Nate. Football season, man. Well, I couldn't ask for anything more.
Buddy, I was watching football at 9 a.m. yesterday. I'm pretty excited. We've been breaking it down a little bit. What did you think when you saw the 12.5 favorite on BetUs.com Florida State Seminoles go down yesterday to Georgia Tech in Dublin?
Yeah, being a Florida guy, right, growing up in South Florida, was a big Florida State fan, so didn't like seeing that. But I think some of the tenets of the game rang true, right? They dominated the line of scrimmage, both offense and defense, right?
Yeah.
Georgia Tech did a really good job of setting the tone on defense and established who they were, and that's why it paid off in the end. I mean, think about it; they overcame some big mistakes late and still won the game. So, pretty impressed with what they did up front and physically. They really took it to Florida State.
No, that's what impressed me the most about this Georgia Tech team was, they took shots at the end. I mean, we were mentioning DJU drove Florida State down late to kick a field goal to tie the game. And, they could have, this game could have gone the other way right there. They could have made a mistake. They could have tightened up in the rear end and given it away to them. But we feel like this is more of Georgia Tech being better than, Florida State being horrible. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I think when you look at it, right, first game of the year, you kind of want to figure out who you are, what's your identity. Georgia Tech knew that, right? They knew they were going to run the ball. They knew they were going to try to be physical up front. They didn't get overly gimmicky, right? They stuck to their keys. They did everything they were supposed to do. They knew their game plan. Whereas I think Florida State's still trying to figure that out, right? They're athletically great, but their defense identity right now is a challenge. And you go back and look at the last, I don't know, call it 7 to 8 national championship teams. They had a really good identity on defense, right? They knew who they were. That they set the tone for the team, and that's true for any really, high caliber team. That defense is really what's going to set that. You saw Georgia Tech had that, whereas Florida State, I think, is still looking for it.
Yeah, and James, that Florida State defense last year was absolutely legit. But as you mentioned, they lost a lot of guys. We saw it in the bowl game when they got 66 points dropped on them. Losing those guys means something. And, 2 of them are, starting at D tackle in the NFL this year, and Jared Verse and the other guy that I can't remember his name right now. But they were legit defensively. And yesterday it did not look like the same thing. Do you see Florida State getting back there, James, defensive wise this year, or are we going to see more of what we saw, yesterday?
Well, they got to get the edge. I mean, there were so many plays where Haynes King just had the edge over and over and over again. And if you can't contain that, that's a major league problem. But, what's funny is I go back to one of our previous interviews with you, Steve, talking about quarterbacks get too much credit and too much blame depending on if they win or lose. And I look at DJU yesterday. I mean, it's not like we have a small sample size of who this guy is. And you go on Twitter and you would have thought that, how bad a quarterback he was. That guy can't block for himself. Plus, he had no deep threats. I mean, we know he throws to the boundary and, temporarily goes deep, but doesn't go over the middle. I mean, what are your thoughts listening to people complaining about DJU? Because personally, he wasn't the problem. That offensive line was like watching Swiss cheese.
Well, so, right, Georgia Tech knew who they were on defense. They dropped 8 people into coverage. They got pressure with just bringing 4 or 3, right? And that changes your game plan. When was DJU the most successful, right? At the end of the game when they're blitzing on 4th down? He was great, right? Yeah, they did a good job in man coverage, but at the end of the day, the receivers didn't get open, and, he didn't have much help on the back end. So They were playing it safe, keeping everything in front of them, limit the big plays. I would do the same thing against Florida State, right? Especially with the transfer portal and the receivers they got. You got an experienced quarterback that can get the ball downfield, take it away from them. Make them be disciplined and get 3-4 yards of a carry. They couldn't do it, right? And that's hard. So
Georgia Tech's never going to have Florida State's athletes, no matter how hard they try. And that's why it was like watching their game plan defensively is keep everything in front of them and just go downhill constantly and make them have long, sustained drives because teams like Florida State want to punch it quick. So
it's hard to do, right? So,
yeah, no doubt. Well, Georgia Tech's better, man. And there, as we were talking, they've been recruiting at a very high clip, especially this offseason with this coaching regime in place. They just brought in their first ever 5-star recruit offensive lineman from Georgia. Should make a big difference right away next year. And they've got several other guys that they've signed a slew, about 4 or 5 4-stars that they've got coming in as well. And maybe this can be a team that can compete, in years to come, especially in the ACC, considering how some of the other teams are, heading downward from where they've been. But this year we've got it, Steve. We've got the 12-team playoff. Everybody's been wanting this for forever, and now it's here. What do you think about this 12-team format? Before we dig into the teams that we think are going to make it, what do you think about finally having a 12-team playoff and how this thing is structured? What are your thoughts on it?
Prior to the season starting, I didn't love it, right? Too many teams, I thought in my mind, how are we going to execute it? What does that look like? Now just kind of sitting back and seeing how they're rolling it out, I think it's great. And it came into play this first week, right? Florida State, to your point, how do they respond? They're going to have a dominant defense again. Those younger guys that came in and replaced people are going to step up. Yep. And they're still going to have a shot, right? Whereas in the past, a loss like this, their season was not much to play for, right? They're playing for a bowl game, maybe an ACC championship, but that's it. Now that's changed, right? They still have a shot to get into the playoff and do really well. So I think just the psychology of it allows these younger players to get some action early, so they do have that experience at the end. But it's going to be interesting to see how it all plays out. But 12 will be a good number, and I'm excited to see it shake out.
Yeah, and James, I want to get your thoughts on this too. Last year, I don't feel like there was 12 teams that could even compete for the national championship. This year, we're going to get into it in about 3 minutes here, whether or not we think there are 12 teams. And we're going to talk about the 12 teams, at least at the beginning of the season, that we think are eligible for this. But what do you think about the number? We're already talking about, we haven't even played the damn games yet. We haven't gotten one playoff game in the history of college football yet. And we're already talking about adding 2 more and doing 14. So what do you think about the number, James, of 12? And where do you think it's going to go? Do you think it's going to expand beyond this? Do you think 12 is a good number? I mean, what do you think?
Honestly, right now, you don't know what you don't know. I mean, let's be honest. When we went from 2 to 4, what's the first thing people do? They bitch about, because if you're the 5th team, you want more teams in. I mean, hell, you go to the NCAA basketball tournament when it was 64. The 65th team is bitching about getting in, and now we have playing games. And I mean, it's no matter what number we set, there's always going to be people complaining who want more and more in. Yeah. But there is a limit of how many games these kids can play before their bodies completely break down. Mm-hmm. I mean, the one thing I will say, I think the NCAA is really missing the mark on. It's not even NCAA; it's the playoff committee. Is those the first round games are going to be at the higher seeded stadium,
right?
Why not have those quarterfinal games also at the higher seeded stadium? Because, I mean, let's be honest. How many Big Ten teams would love to see an SEC team come into Columbus, to Ann Arbor, to Iowa City, to Madison, to Minneapolis in December?
Yeah.
Like, there's playing within the elements is part of the game. And I think having that be part of that has to be part of the equation. The NFL does it. I mean, how many times you have to play in cold Green Bay or Buffalo or Kansas City where the conditions are in Tampa. Absolutely.
Yeah. No, I like the fact that the lower tier games are going to be played on campus. I'm with you. I wish all of them were, but we know what this is about. It's a money grab, and they want to put it at a neutral site and make people pay to go there and have the big, money people up in the boxes and all that crap.
Yeah.
But we know how that goes. But the main thing that I want to know from you, Steve, and the biggest question I've got is, what does this look like adding, 2, 3, potentially 3 more games to the body? All we ever hear is that we're player safety. We want to have these guys, safe. We want to try and prevent injuries. But then in the NFL, we keep adding games. And now in college football, we're going to keep adding games. I mean, injuries are a part of it. They're going to come up. People are going to get hurt. But how much more guys get hurt? And what does this do to, kids having to play in a tournament like this in college football?
Well, I think that's why, my comment earlier, right? In these early games, you have to get your young guys in because they are a play away, right? They're a play away anyway at any given time. But that experience, that game speed will come into play later in the year. So having these opportunities and, prior to this, the schedules were let's get our best, away games, out of conference games to show that we're a premier team. You're going to see that change a little bit, right? Why should we schedule SEC team early to prove that we're great when, there's 12 teams. We can still get in that top 12 if we win out and do our job in the Big Ten Conference. So you're going to see a little bit of that change, which we kind of shifted over the years, right? We were trying to get into that Final Four. You wanted the toughest schedule possible, and hopefully with 1 loss you got in. Now with 2, it's a feasibility that you can get in. So that's one part. But 2, you're right. The body, this will be different for a lot of college kids, right? And you see that transition from rookies to the NFL and what that looks like and how many more games they're playing. But I think with today's conditioning and strength and working up, all the different science behind their workouts, I think they're going to be okay. It's just a matter of getting them acclimated early and getting that good rotation of who your core guys are, and you're going to have a good team.
Yeah, no, I agree. And my big thing is, being a Buckeye homer, which I am, and I always claim to be, we lose 1 game and we're out of it every damn year. If we lose 1 game, we're out of it. And now that's not really the case. If you lose, like Florida State, for example, they lost 1 game yesterday. They're not done. They can still make the top 12, pretty easily. Me and James just talked about their schedule and what they've got left. They've got Clemson, they got Miami, and not so much else. So I could see them, being okay.
The only thing that hurts them is Georgia Tech goes out and lays an egg for the rest of the year, which that would be hard for me to believe after seeing what we just saw, right? I mean, they have the recipes to be a really tough team to beat because they can run the ball and play hard defense.
No doubt. And I'm interested to see if they can keep building on what they accomplished yesterday with taking down a top 10 team. I mean, that was pretty impressive. And I don't give a shit where they played. Ireland, Afghanistan, Australia. It doesn't really matter to me. They showed up and got it done. And I'm interested to see if they can keep things going like that, because there's times where Georgia Tech used to be a pretty good football program. The 3 of us are old enough to recall that. And maybe that'll happen again. But, I want to get into, we talk about this 12-team playoff. We've broken it down pretty heavy as far as what we think it's going to look like, what it's going to feel like, what the players are going to go through to get there. But let's talk about the teams that we think are going to be involved in it. And obviously, we'll look at the AP preseason top 12, what teams that we like in there, what teams we think got left out of there, what teams we think will be there at the end of the season. We've already talked about Georgia pretty heavy and discussed them because we broke down, Steve, the Clemson and Georgia game coming up next week. So I want to go ahead and get to number 2 here, if you can believe that, and discuss the Ohio State Buckeyes. Preseason number 2, they've just named, their quarterback, brought the veteran Howard in from Kansas State. He's beat out the younger kids. Obviously, this defense was unbelievable last year, Steve. I mean, one of the better Buckeye defenses I've ever seen, and that's saying something. What do you think about the Buckeyes as they stand now? Nobody better to ask than you about what you see, what you see for them coming up in this 2024 season. And is this, in your mind, a playoff team? I mean, I think most people think they are.
Sorry, guys. You got me now?
Yeah, we got you.
Yeah, we got it.
All right. So here's what I'll say, right? If you look at historically the most dominant Ohio State teams we've had a true identity on defense. I think we genuinely have that now. Like there is no doubt of we know who we are. We have all the right players in the right spot. And then the next part to that, when we've won national championships or anyone, we were establishing the run first to open the pass. I think with adding Chip Kelly in and his expertise on his run game and how he can coach that, I think we have all the pieces in place to do what we need to do, right? We've gotten to the game many times, and just those little things there at the end, I think, have been the major difference. And so now the challenge is we have all those pieces in place. We have to go execute. Keep it simple. Don't get out of, don't get too cute, right? We have the horses in the barn that we can use every single game, but establish the run first to open the pass. And that's going to be a little bit of nuance that I don't think we've done previously, right? Because we've established the pass first to open for the run, but I think we'll fundamentally change that. I do. I think that's just the way Chip Kelly thinks. Maybe I'm wrong, but excited to see what the defense does just because they have players everywhere, right? All the people returning, they have veteran leadership and athletes everywhere. So I'm excited, right? I think it's theirs to lose. And if they've done their job, they should be looking at a Georgia playing in the national championship. And it's going to be a hell of a game.
I agree. And James, I want to ask you, Coach Day's, come under fire with, everything. I mean, this guy's 56-8, and you'd think he was 8-56. The way that some people talk about him, not me, but others, want to criticize him for not winning a national championship. I mean, he's been a head coach all 5 years, supposed to have 5 titles, I guess, so far. But, he did give up the play calling in this offseason. He brought in a guy I don't think people talk about this enough. This guy was a head coach for the UCLA Bruins. He quit and comes to be the offensive coordinator at Ohio State. And I was kind of scratching my head as to why. And then I saw the press conference when we were there at the spring game, checking things out. And he said, I wanted to coach football again. He said, with all the NIL, with all the recruiting, he's like, I never really got to coach football as the head coach at UCLA. He's like, I'm excited to coach football again. We know who Chip Kelly is. James, what do you think he will bring to this offense? And do you think this was a good move, bringing him in to call plays?
Absolutely. I mean, we can sit there and talk about his time at UCLA, but this guy was the head coach at not one, but 2 NFL teams. Plus he was the head coach at Oregon. But the greatest asset I think he has is he and Ryan Day. This isn't their first freaking merry-go-round together. He actually coached Ryan Day in college. They have a same thought process of how they want to attack a game. Now, the one aspect I look at Ohio State where I think their biggest weakness is their offensive line. And you looked at, like, from a recruiting standpoint, they've had a lot of misses on the offensive line. And that's going to be really the key between them and winning a national championship, to be honest with you. If that offensive line can get back to those days of old, Henderson and Junkins are going to have a field day behind what Chip Kelly can do and what he can imagine up.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think, the offensive line is definitely a point of emphasis to look at, especially at the beginning of the season. And they have missed on some guys. Sanders was probably the most recent one who decided to go here to Tennessee. I think they paid him a lot of bucks to do that. But, that's how it works these days. I mean, where can you get these kids to commit to and how much do you have to pay them? It's what it comes down to. And they need to do a better job recruiting linemen. I don't feel that the offensive line is as bad as some people think. This is year 2 for their left tackle. They've shuffled around the rest of the group. But Steve, I thought I heard you saying that Chip Kelly's going to run the ball. I think these guys are going to be more aggressive. It's not just going to be drop back and see if you can stop people from hitting the quarterback. They're going to be taking it to people this year, and I think that will kind of get this offensive line going. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, go back and look at Chip Kelly's tape when he was the head coach at Oregon. They were a power run team out of the spread. Like, he invented it, right? I mean, and now he has the personnel to do that here. I fundamentally believe he is going to establish the run, right? And that'll be the tell sign if we win the national championship. If we can come out every game and actually run the ball, get 3-4 yards of carry, just think about what we're going to be able to do on the back end. And that's where Chip Kelly is invaluable with his experience. One, he's half invented it. 2, he's learned that in the NFL. He's got all that experience, and he's got the tools now to go execute it. So I I fundamentally believe that he has all the expertise and the personnel to go do exactly what he wants to do.
You know he's setting it up where they're going to get
Mhm.
single coverage on Smith and Ibuka,
Thank
and
you.
it's just going to be like, have fun. Trying to single coverage Smith is going to be impossible.
Yep.
How are you going to cover any of these guys? I mean, they've got Ibuka, they've got Carnell Tate, who you didn't even mention. They've got Jeremiah Smith, Brandon Ennis, Mylan Graham, Bryson Rogers. I mean, Jalen Ballard. This wide receiver core is absolutely sick and ridiculous, and it's going to be hard to stop. And then you add in, Quinshon Judkins, Travion Henderson, James Peoples, Sam Williams-Dixon. I mean, there's 4 deep at running back that I like. So I think we're good there. Let's talk about the team that Chip Kelly used to coach. And, these 2 teams, Ohio State and Oregon, are go ahead.
No, you're good. You're good. I was going to say Chip's going to have the maturity to be able to set up what we want, right? That's the one thing we're going to have to be challenged on is like, we have all these nice cars in the driveway. Let's go drive them all. Establish a run. Then go have fun with your toys.
Yeah, no, I think he knows how to use weapons. He did it at Oregon. He had a Heisman Trophy winner and Marcus Mariota at quarterback, who was kind of a dual threat guy. He's going to have a little bit of that with the Will Howard from Kansas State. He can run it, he can throw it. I think that running dimension is going to be huge because we didn't have that last year. I mean, Kyle McCord was not a runner of the football, and we found that out early. One of the toughest tests for Ohio State and for a lot of teams this year is going to be Oregon. Dan Lanning's come in since he joined Oregon as their head coach and done a pretty damn good job. And I like where this team is right now. They're replacing a lot of people too, but they've been recruiting, gangbusters. I mean, he's been hitting on guys all over the place. They're preseason number 3. I like this. I like the depth chart that Oregon's got. They can sustain an injury if something like that were to happen. They went and got Dylan Gabriel. They've got Dante Moore as the backup quarterback. James, I'll go to you first. Evan Stewart, adding him to the mix, I think that's going to make a big difference, having that playmaker on offense. What do you think about this Oregon team as a whole? And do you agree with the 3 ranking? And what do you think of their chances of getting, to the playoff and winning games there?
I think very good. I think the one thing that people, forget about, I mean, everybody talks about the specialty guys. What they did in the transfer portal was unreal. But you look more importantly at the line of scrimmage play, which has been really the hallmark of great Oregon teams, even dating back to when Chip Kelly was there. Their line of scrimmage play is really good. You bring in Birch from South Carolina. You got the Cornelius kid from Rhode Island for his second year there. I mean, yeah, they lost some serious talent there, but that line of scrimmage play, I think them going into the Big Ten, they're the most built to play Big Ten football of the 4 teams coming in by far. Like, there is a serious gap between Oregon and whoever's next.
I agree. And Steve, I want to get your thoughts. I mean, you were the quarterback for the Buckeyes. You had to travel long distances to play some games. What do you feel like that's going to do to Oregon, having to come east as many times as they do, and the other teams as well, but mainly, Oregon's chances? How does that hurt it? How does it affect it? Is it going to do anything as far as affect their chances having to, come all the way across the country for multiple games?
I think a team like Oregon, it doesn't matter, right? I think they have, to your point, they did really well in the transfer portal. They got some veteran guys that are reestablishing their leadership in the room. So I think they'll be fine coming out and traveling. I think, the nuance of that is that they have back-to-back away games that are traveling off the East Coast. But generally, teams of that caliber are going to figure it out, right? If you just looked on paper, their coaching staff, who they got in the transfer portal, what they did recruiting, and you put it on paper and said, hey, they're the number 1 team in the country, I don't think a lot of people would argue with that, right? I mean, they are extremely talented, and then they're going to go out and have a hell of a run. It's just a matter, can they sustain these wins on the road, which national championship teams do. So I think they have the recipe to do it. It's just a matter of they execute or not. But I don't think that travel for them will be a bigger deal. But you get a younger team the different type of roster, yeah, that matters, right? And being able to prepare for that and train for it and just mentally rep that helps. But I don't think you need to worry about that with Oregon.
Yeah, what do you think about this quarterback? Obviously, number 8 on his jersey, Dylan Gabriel. He's gotten it done thus far. I mean, I was pretty impressed with what he did last year at Oklahoma. And when the hell did Oklahoma become a stepping stone for kids to go to other schools, right? I mean, I remember when Oklahoma used to play for the title every year, and now people go to Oklahoma for a year and then bounce. That's where we're at, I guess. But Steve, give me your thoughts on this Dylan Gabriel kid. Is he a kid you think that can win the national champion? Kid, I guess he's 20-something years old now. Young man, can you see him leading them to the title? Is he a kid that's got the talent to do that?
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, you look at what he put on paper. I think his biggest negative in Oklahoma is he didn't have a defense that could hold people to less than 40 points. I mean, his offense was productive. His efficiency's off the chart. He's mature. He knows the offense. You're going to plug him in with more athletes and a better defense. He's going to have a Heisman type year, right? He'll be a part of that conversation all year long. I don't know why he wouldn't. Now, he's going to have to win these tough games on the road and things like that, travel, but he's got one of his biggest games at home with the Buckeyes. I mean, it's set up for him to have a really, storied year if he goes out and does all these things. So it'll be interesting to watch. I'm excited for it, actually.
Yeah, me too. James, what do you think about Gabriel, and what is it about him that you'd like the most, I guess?
I would go exactly what Steve said, the maturity aspect. I mean, you look at it from a pure talent standpoint, is Dylan Gabriel going to be playing in the NFL on Sundays? No. But something, you don't have to be. The college game is different than the pro game, where his backup, Dante Moore, yeah, that kid has a very good chance of playing on Sundays. But, the one thing that people don't realize is Dylan Gabriel just knows how to win games. He has that gut instinct of what he has to do. And he's done it before at Central Florida, at Oklahoma, everywhere the kid's gone. He just knows how to win, even with those deficiencies somewhere else on their team.
Yeah, I like him. And I was actually pretty shocked when I found out he was going to Oregon and was bouncing from Oklahoma. I thought that, Oklahoma would do everything they could to keep him, and I'm pretty sure they did. But, this is the way that it works now, and better get used to it, because we're looking at 1-year contracts, basically.
Well, Oklahoma's got a kid named Jackson Arnold who's got a big arm. Like, that kid's going to step in, and it's going to be interesting to see how they change that offense for him, because he's a gunslinger. Like, he's an old-school Brett Favre type of gunslinger.
Yeah, talking about gunslingers, let's go right to the next team on that premise, because we're talking about the Texas Longhorns. Every year is Texas going to be back? Every season we wanted to know if they're ever going to be good again, because it was a long time, from when Vince Young was running into the end zone to where they were, worth a shit. And last year they finally did it, man. They made the college football playoff. They looked pretty good. I know they lost to Washington, but it wasn't like they got stomped or anything. And Quinn Ewers has been a kid that's definitely talent rich, but he looks like he's kind of figured out who he is a little bit. Steve, talk to me about this Texas team from what you saw last year and what you expect from them this year. Do you expect them to get better? Do you expect Quinn Ewers to get better? And what do you think the ceiling is for the Longhorns?
Yeah, I definitely think they're going to be better when you have a veteran quarterback with his ability. But what's interesting, and you're starting to see it at Ohio State and some of these other schools, when you have that level of talent on a roster, right, the iron sharpens iron. The best thing that probably happened to Quinn Ewers is that Archie Manning's there. Like, they're competing against each other every single day. And knowing the pedigree of the Mannings and where he's coming from, that competition is only making both of them better, right? There is no animosity. They are truly striving to get better, and you see that in their play. Yeah. And that's what's kind of special. And I think the athletes they have, you got a very veteran, talented quarterback. What they put on paper last year was really good. I expect a lot more of the same, if not better.
Yeah, James, what do you think is probably, what's the identity of this Longhorns team? Is it their ability to throw the football? Obviously last year they had the big bruisers up front on defense who, pretty much stuffed out the run of anyone who was trying. What do you think the identity of this year's Texas team is, and what do you think their chances are of winning the title?
They've got some question marks they got to fill. I mean, not only a D tackle, losing those two unbelievable D tackles. That was probably one of the best combinations you've probably seen of all time. But one thing I think a lot of people forgot about last year was their running game really helped set up their passing game. Jonathan Brooks was really unknown coming into last year, and he really showed out. And I think it's going to be a very talented kid in Carolina in the near future. But now CJ Baxter's out. They've got injuries galore. I mean, they got to find something in their running game, because otherwise everybody's just going to sit back on them and see what they do. And the receiving core isn't nearly as strong. You don't have a Xavier Worthy sitting there. I mean, you got Silas Bolden and Isaiah Bond as your top two receiving guys.
Yeah.
I mean, that's going to be – their running game has got to be there. Otherwise, they're going to have a more difficult time.
Yeah. And their running back field is taking some hits, with injuries already this offseason. Two guys, I believe, that are both out for the season, correct?
Yeah, Baxter and Blue, and then you lost, you lost Brooks to the pros. I mean,
right.
They
lost two guys to the pros.
Oh, that's true. I mean, right now, I'm guessing they're going to start Jarrett Gibson or Christian Clark.
They've got.
They're going to be thin. They're going to be thin at running back.
Yeah, they could be, but remember what state they're in, right?
True.
So you think of recruiting like, hey, we gotta replace skill guys at Texas.
Yeah. No, they got two solid freshmen. They got two solid freshmen. They got Jarrett Gibson and Christian Clark, and both those guys could start anywhere in the country. So as Steve said, don't feel too bad for them.
To your point, right? They got to establish how are they going to do on defense and replace some of those big names that they lost. And they do have to run the ball first. That's what made Quinn Ewers good. Now this year he can probably lead it a little bit more because of his experience and what they have. But plug it in receivers for a guy like that, I think they're going to be okay at Texas.
Yeah.
That Michigan game is going to be really indication of what this team's really going to be right away. You're going to find out who they are, what their identity is.
No doubt.
Yeah, we're gonna see how good both those teams are real quick. We're gonna get to those guys in just a minute, but first off, I want to knock some of these out fairly quickly. The greatest coach of all time stepped away in the offseason. To be honest, there wasn't much movement on this team. I know Caleb Downs left, went to Ohio State, but there wasn't a mass exodus. And let's be honest, they brought in a guy that can win. James, I'll go with you first here. What do you expect out of this Bama team? This is Milroe year 2. You know that I'm a big fan of Jalen Milroe. I thought he was the best quarterback on their team last year when other people did not. Turns out he was. And, I point out when I'm wrong. I also point out when I'm right. I like this kid, and I think he's going to get we talked about other people, Quinn Ewers getting better. I think Jalen Milroe will get better. How do you think he fits in DeBoer's offense, and what do you think year 1 in the post Nick Saban era looks like for Alabama?
This is the $6 million question. You look at everywhere Kalen DeBoer has gone. All he does is win. He just knows how to develop kids and make them better. This is going to be, I think, his biggest lift, because the receiving core, it was not a strength of Alabama last year. And now Kobe Prentice is probably their strongest guy coming back. They lost Bond to Texas.
Yep.
I look at this team and I'm like, Milroe is a different type of quarterback. If he can develop Milroe, then quite frankly, Kalen DeBoer can do anything. This is going to be one of those, because it's a lot different at Washington, where you go 8-4, 9-3. People are still happy. You go 9-3 at Alabama, they're talking about firing you. And that's just every loss becomes very difficult for them. And you look at game 3 at Wisconsin. It doesn't start off very easy for them.
Yeah, no, their schedule is going to be difficult, and there's a lot of pressure on them. Steve, I want to ask you a question here. You've seen coaching changes, even in your career, and watching the Buckeyes closely. How do you think this team, responds to the new leadership, and do you think that they will have the ability to just continue fighting for a national championship, even with losing the greatest coach of all time?
Yeah. So I think the one huge advantage they have is history, right? Nick Saban set a standard. That standard hasn't changed. There's just a new guy running what the standard is and how they're going to execute to it. So the foundation of just knowing what to expect and coaching to a standard, that's there. What's interesting is now you have this coach from Washington who had a very veteran Penix quarterback, right? I mean, he's 25 years old, been in college for a long time. They had an unbelievable relationship. Look what they were able to accomplish. So to your point, if him and Milroe have that same type of chemistry and trust, I don't see a ton of drop off from this team, right? Because they have that foundation of the standard and who they are. He's a hell of a coach that's been to the national championship, but that relationship with his quarterback will make or break their season.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, that's what made them special last year, was that there was multiple times where it was 3rd and 9 and the game was on the line and they picked it up. And they had the receivers, but they had that quarterback who he just believed that he could get it done no matter what the situation was. And it led them all the way to the national championship game. The only shitty part was that they couldn't win that final game, because that would have made me a lot happier of a human being if they could have pulled that out. But I digress. Let's talk about the other team in the SEC West. On paper, this is obviously Lane Kiffin's most talented team that he's ever had at Ole Miss. On paper, they were pretty good last year, but there was a couple games, James, where we were kind of like, what the hell's going on here? The Kentucky game I point to specifically, where it just did not look good. Is Ole Miss good enough to beat Alabama? And is Ole Miss a team that you think can get into this 12-team playoff and compete to win it?
Until they win that big game, the jury's still out with me with Lane Kiffin. We know what they are on offense. I mean, quite frankly, change out the quarterback, change out the receivers. I mean, periodically they'll have a good running game with Jumpkins, where they go from a passing to a hardcore running team. It's been their defense. It's been their biggest problem. I mean, they addressed a lot of needs in that transfer portal, specifically Nolan. I mean, that he's probably the best defensive lineman they've had since Nduche. And until they can pull off that big win, I think the jury's still out. But I mean, you look at the schedule, God, it's pretty. I mean, besides at LSU, they play all the right teams at home.
Yeah. No, I agree. And, you got Dabo, who refuses to take a transfer. And then you got Lane Kiffin, who has half of his starters are all brand new players.
Look at Dan Lanning, same way.
Yeah, no, I agree. I'm just saying there's two ways of doing it now. Steve, what do you think about Lane Kiffin and the way that he's constructed this team? And what do you think about this Ole Miss team? Do you see them having a chance to win the SEC even?
Yeah, so I mean, you hit the nail on the head, right? You have two ways of doing this now with the transfer portal. You either build a team and hope you get the kids that buy in and stay, and you can coach to the standard that we talked about, or you fill in the gaps with transfer portal. Ole Miss, SMU, right? They've taken huge advantage of that. That all said, on paper, can they win it? Yeah, right. Just talent-wise, they have it. Now the next question becomes, from a team chemistry, when the chips are down, you're getting punched in the mouth. How do they react? So the one question you have for a team with that many transfers, how can they stay consistent week in and week out? These guys haven't played together. They don't have history. And if you've ever seen a recipe for a really good football team, it's consistency. Saban did that, right? Ohio State's done that. We've lost the big games at the end. Dabo's established that. They're consistent. You know what you're going to expect out of them. So if Ole Miss can figure that out early from a team chemistry and be consistent, they have an identity, right? You mentioned earlier, first it's a run pass, and it's we're going to run first. They got to figure out who they are and what that's going to be. And that's, I think, the biggest question on Lane Kiffin. He does a really good job of taking the depth, what he's been played with, maximizing it. But now they got to establish some consistency to it with a whole bunch of new guys. So we'll see what happens.
Steve, I got a question for you. You know, the one thing about the portal that scares the crap out of me is there's just such a short time period of looking at it. Everybody's looking at on the field. Don't you think that, you know, you could have had a player that was great on the field, but a complete and utter cancer in the locker room, and now you're trading one cancer for another cancer? I mean, do you think the transfer portal makes that problem even more pronounced now?
For sure, because those guys can hide, right? It wasn't me,
Yeah.
it was them. I wasn't in the right scheme, and then really it's a you problem, right? I mean, but that's the difference, I think, when I talk about what Saban did in the standard. Like, you can take all that ego stuff and your system, like, here's the standard, here's what we're going to accept, and that's it. And the coaches that can establish that, even with the transfer portal, you're going to see them reap huge benefits because of that. Because I'll use the New England Patriots as a great example, right? You have Randy Moss at his prime, who allegedly had these problems and was a wild card, goes to New England, doesn't say a peep, has the best season of his life because he bought into the standard, right? So it's possible, but you got to be that type of a coach, which in college you can do. That's a lot harder to do in the NFL, right? But to your point, these are 1-year contracts, and they got to get them to buy in fast.
Yeah,
and so the coaches that can do that will win.
No, I agree, and I think the biggest thing for Ole Miss is just what you said, and that was what I was looking for: consistency. We just didn't see that last year. 1 week they would look pretty solid; they would get a bunch of points on the board, offense would look great, and then the next week, not so much. And I think Judkins being gone is going to affect them. Honestly, I think if they would have been able to hang on to that kid, we would have seen a different looking team. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say, and everything I've heard about, that's the kid you want in your locker room, right?
Yeah.
So that, on top of being just a great talent, he's a great locker room guy, and like that's what you want, right? So you see guys like that leave, and what are you replacing it with, right? And they're gonna have to figure that out.
No doubt.
You got to admit that was the shocker of the transfer portal. Like, no one saw that one coming at all, and then on top of it, him going to Ohio State, like with Henderson still there, it's just like, holy crap. I mean, that shows kind of to his character that he's, he wants to win that bad.
Yeah. Team is bigger than him.
Yeah.
No, I think, from what I've seen from him in practice and in the spring game, this kid is legit. And, we saw it last year. He's proven it on the field. And I think he fits the Chip Kelly offense, very well with the different things he can do. Let's talk about a couple more teams before we get out of here. I want to hit on, the team we talked about a little bit earlier, James. That's Notre Dame. We've seen Marcus Freeman come in, and obviously the first year was a little bit of a struggle, losing to Ohio State early, and then, having the horrible losses to Marshall and also to Stanford. They're still trying to find, out who they are. Like Steve was talking about earlier with some of these other teams. They went out and got Riley Leonard, as we mentioned a few minutes ago. They still got Jack Kaiser, who's been their linebacker for 19 seasons. What do you think about this Notre Dame team, James? And is this team constructed to win a national championship? Because I don't think so, but I want to know what you think.
I really don't. I mean, you look at them. I mean, the line of scrimmage play has always been their hallmark. I mean, it doesn't matter who their coach is. They're better teams are when they have the better offense and defensive line, and they have something, at their quarterback position. But they've always been a hard-nosed team. I just look at them as a whole, and I just don't see it. It's not like their recruiting has definitely gotten better, but I think it's going to take time for them to really take that next step. I mean, I'm impressed that they're allowing transfers to come into Notre Dame. I mean, I remember a time where redshirting and transfers were a no-no in South Bend.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this is completely – I mean, Father Joyce is probably rolling over in his grave right now after some of the stuff that, has happened now. So it's a tough job because those alumni, man, they really push the buttons there. And their schedule is not exactly easy with some of those road games they play.
Yeah, Steve, you know Marcus Freeman. What do you think? What do you think about the job he's done so far? And do you think that he is a coach that can get Notre Dame, over they've Brian Kelly's the winningest coach in the history of Notre Dame football, and they kind of acted like they wanted him to leave, or at least that was what we were led to believe. Is Marcus Freeman an upgrade over Brian Kelly?
Here's what I'll say. If you look at Notre Dame, do they belong in the top 12? Yes, without a doubt. Are they going to beat the top 5 teams? Probably not. Do I believe in Marcus Freeman? 1,000%. I think he's the right guy for that job. The challenge is, right, they are handcuffed with transfer portal and people getting in academically. Like, it is different for Notre Dame. It just is. It always has been. But if there's a guy that can get it done and get people to buy in and build an identity, I put a lot of stock in Marcus Freeman. I'm a big fan. He's a player's coach. The hard part is in today's era, right, does he have enough time to do that?
Yeah.
And I believe at Notre Dame he does. I hope he does, because I think he could go on to be that greatest, winningest coach. This brings up something that I find interesting in college football. We hear it at Ohio State. You could hear it, in other places. Ryan Day needs to win this game, or, Coach Freeman needs to win this. No, we want them to. There is no need, right? We've gotten to a society where we think these wants are needs, and that's not really the case. Like, to your point, 58-8, Ryan Day, we don't need him to win every game. We want him to, right?
Yeah.
So it's just a difference. And I just hope with where Marcus is at, I think he has the opportunity to do really well and build something pretty special at Notre Dame.
Yeah, no doubt. And he's brought in some legacy players. There's no doubt about that. He's got Elijah Burris, Plaxico's son. He's got Ivan Taylor, Ike Taylor's son. He's got Jerome Bettis Jr. He's got Brian Urlacher's kid. As far as like bringing in people's kids, he's the shit. He's got them all. So we'll give him that.
Those are the kids you want in the locker room, right? You talk about building consistency and an identity. Like, those kids know what it's about just by being who they are, right? Their parents, their dads, they set that standard. They know it.
That's a true story. And we hear Ryan Day get criticized, for the big games. Another guy who is just quintessentially a pants pooper in the big game is up in Penn State land. We talked, Steve, you came on with us last year several times. We talked about Drew Aller and what he was and who he is. There's high hopes up there in Penn State right now. How good do you think this Penn State team is? And do you think this is the year that they can, get in the playoff and make some noise? Obviously, they don't have to get into the 4-team playoff. They just have to be in the top 12, and if they can do that, they can, have a chance. What do you think about Penn State, and what do you think about their chances in the Big Ten and elsewhere?
Yeah, I think Penn State's going to be a really good football team, right? They've always been a good football team. The question mark comes, do they win those close games at the end? And I got to believe with Drew Aller and his talent and everything that they're going to have those opportunities. They just have to do it. I think, if I remember, they have a pretty tough road schedule this year, right? And so that's going to be their biggest challenge. If they can come away on some of those road games and win a few that are close, right, that puts them in the top 12 pretty easily. So I think they have the talent. They have the quarterback to do it. It's just they got to go out and execute. And I think they can. I don't know, right? I mean, they haven't done it in the past, so that would be my only question mark on it.
Yeah, James, what do you like about this Penn State team? And do you feel like they are, a contender coming in right now at, preseason number 8? Is that too high for you? Is that where you think they should be? Where you got?
I think if they could find that receiver, you look at their running game and their offensive line, the way the defense is played, they just need that receiver. They need that KJ. They need that Hamlin guy. They just need that one guy to help basically take some load off. Because between Singleton and Allen, their running game is fantastic. So,
yeah, no, I like them. The rest of the way here, we've got Florida State, who we already talked about pretty deeply. We've got Missouri. We've got Utah. We've got that team up north. is ranked number 9. Why the hell are they ranked number 9? Can someone
They bring a
explain
lot
that for
back.
me?
They bring a lot back.
Do they?
Yeah.
Because I thought they lost like 18 guys.
Yeah, but you still got Mason Graham and Grant and Johnson on that defense. They're going to be solid. Plus, their offensive line's always good. It's just going to come down to Alex Orji at quarterback. Can he throw? And who they got at receiver? I mean, they got Loveland Colston, but I mean, it's going to be a lot of like 1980s 3 yards in a cloud of dust. I mean,
which they can do.
Which
they can do.
Yeah, exactly.
You got to remember, they lined up against Penn State the second half last year and did not throw the ball once.
Yeah,
they're like, we're running the ball over here. Stop it.
Yeah,
and they still that's their identity. They're going to be that team.
Yeah,
so they're going to create problems. As much as I don't like to admit it, but they've recruited well. I don't think they're going to have a huge drop. I mean, it'll be a drop off at quarterback, but that kid's going to figure it out. He's going to be able to make plays, and they're going to use him differently, which will make them even harder, right? He'll use the run game more with him, and you get a running quarterback with that kind of line. They're going to be tough to stop. I mean, that's just who they are.
Yeah, my biggest question, James, is their wide receiver core. They got Frederick Moore, Tyler Morris, Samaj Morgan. Who the hell are these guys? And do they have the ability to come? I mean, last year they had a lot of big plays out of the passing game, and when they needed it, they were able to press the ball deep. I mean, I don't know much about those 3 guys. Do you?
Losing Roman Wilson really hurt. I don't think people really understood how good he was.
He's real good.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a reason why he's on an NFL roster. He's going to go have a really good NFL career.
Yeah.
He does the dirty work, right? He blocks. He runs the right routes. He's a good wide receiver.
Honestly, I don't think he got a chance to really showcase how good he was playing in that Michigan offense.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, we're about out of time for today, guys. But next week, we're going to have some actual live football games, several of them to talk about. And I look forward to it. I mean, college football's back, boys. So thank you guys for joining me today.
We didn't talk about it, but I'm tell you right now, Utah's going to be a problem this year.
Yes.
In a 12-team format, they're going to be a problem.
Cam Rising.
They got
their line of scrimmage play is always good every single year. Like literally, if there's ever a team that identifies with their coach, it's Utah.
No doubt.
And you talk about consistency. That's a program that brings it consistent every year. And, last year we just kind of were waiting for Cam Rising to come back because they kept telling us he was going to play and he never did. They did a pretty – I'd say that was one of Willingham's best jobs of his career, being able to win as many games as he did with no quarterback.
They're going to be a problem.
Yep. I agree with you. And, we'll hit a little bit more on Missouri and Utah next week, and then LSU and Clemson are right behind them. So we'll talk about those teams as well, and we'll get to see them next week. So I want to thank everybody for listening today. Make sure to check us out 3:00 on Roku TV. We will be replayed on Roku on National Streaming Sports Network, and definitely go place your bets at betus.com. Steve, James, have a great rest of your weekend, boys.
Thank you, gentlemen.
All right, guys. We'll talk to you again real soon. And thanks for everybody for tuning in today. Keep your chins up. And please know that we appreciate you coming in and checking us out. James, college football week 1.
We're back.
Next Saturday. Can't wait.
Got it.
See you, buddy.
Later.
National Streaming Sports is brought to you in part by BetUs.com, designed for true fans. NFL odds, week 1 and futures. College football odds, including Heisman Trophy favorites and playoff odds. NBA odds of division winners and playoffs. Major League Baseball playoff and World Series odds. The National Hockey League Conference playoffs and Stanley Cup odds. And boxing wagers. Betting opportunities include versus the spreads and outright winners. Also, during the game. Use our link on our website, nessp.info, the Bet Us Opportunities webpage for a 125% bonus on your first 3 deposits. Must be 21 years old, and remember, bet responsibly.